guys, hope everybody's doing good out there today. Welcome back to the channel, and time for today's video. And I'm just headed back to Springfield from Joplin. Been visiting Dad in the hospital. Just a little update on him. A lot of people have been asking. He's still in the hospital. It's been his third weekend. Been having some good days and bad days both, but he's sort of got a long road to go. And but it seems like he's maybe gradually getting a little bit better, but it's just, at 86 years old, it takes a long time to get past, 4 surgeries in a course of 3 weeks. So anyway, thanks everybody for the well wishes. They're much appreciated. And hey, before we get started in today's video, just wanted to remind everybody a couple things. Tomorrow night, Johnny and I have our weekly live podcast on Fish the Moment Live YouTube channel. And you can join us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for the weekly podcast. It's going to be a really good time there. And also just wanted to remind you guys too, if you guys are interested in ordering any specific lures, baits for your fishing arsenal right now, I'll include the Boatworks link in the description here. And I've partnered with them, and if you guys use that link to order some of your fishing tackle, the channel gets a small percentage of those sales. And you can go on the Baitworks website, check out everything they have for their online category, or swing by their store in Springfield, Missouri, one of the two. Okay, let's get into today's topic, which is the summer transition. And I'm going to explain a little bit to everybody about what this is and really how you can use it to your advantage to catch more fish. Because I don't think a lot of people really know that it happens. That's something that's pretty definitive, something that's pretty defined. And so I want to go over that a little bit first. But basically, what the summer transition is, it's a lot like any other time of the year. There are transitions that occur normally based upon water temperature, sometimes water clarity and water level, but a lot of these transitions are based upon water temperature changes. And I think about every season has one to some extent, including the summer, which we are sort of into that transition period right now, where we're getting ready to be in that transition period for the most part. But basically what you have on this, what I define as the summer transition, it is when those bass start to move into their true summer patterns away from what I call the late post-spawn patterns. Most of the time across the country, like I said, it depends on the part of the country that you're in, but sometime during the month of May, you definitely have a transition from the bass sort of in that spawning mode into their post-spawn patterns, where they start to move out, away from those spawning areas. A lot of times they move out, to the main and secondary points. If you're fishing a lake that's got ledges, like some of the TVA lakes, that's when those bass start to move out to the ledges. And this is usually in sometime in May, maybe early June, that type of stuff. And they stay out on this stuff for normally, in my opinion, like in my experience, about 3 or 4 weeks. So right now we're sort of starting to wind down on what I consider the early summer, late post-spawn patterns, and we're starting to get into just the pure summer patterns of bass fishing. And weather patterns can hold this up a lot, because based upon the weather patterns in your area, it's something that can take place, a little bit, earlier or later. But one of the things that I've noticed, with the effects of climate change, the past, 10 years in particular, a lot of these summer patterns are basically being accelerated a little bit, several weeks ahead of time. And I've seen that in my own fishing, specifically when those fish start to get offshore in some of the Ozark lakes. It's normally a little bit later now than it was before, so that's just, part of the environment that we're in right now. So here's basically what you need to know on this, and I'm talking about man-made lakes for the most part on this, is after the bass spawn and they start to move out to their post-spawn locations, this is the time of year when a lot of those bass will get, pretty deep on the bottom, and they school up. For example, if you have a lake that's got 2 to 3 feet of visibility, which that's sort of in that ballpark for most lakes across the country, in the early summer, you'll have schools of bass. They're actually schooled up in their largest numbers, especially the quality fish, normally into that anywhere between that 8 to 20 foot zone. like I said, on those ledges, on those point ends and sides, drops, that type of stuff. And this is where they live in June a lot of times. And that's why you catch so many, or you hear about so many big bags, like 20, 25 pound bags in the month of June. That's because these fish are out there, and you can catch them in schools. All these big stringers that get caught on the TVA lakes, all the big cranking stringers that you see like at Lake Eufaula in Alabama, Grand Lake in Oklahoma, most of that happens in June, in the early summer. What you have though is when that water temperature starts to warm up to that 80-degree mark, and normally it starts to warm up in that 80-degree mark sometime in July, the first part of July, maybe sometimes towards the end of June, like right now. It just depends on the geographical location you're in. Those bass that were out there on those deeper hard structure places, and they were schooled up, they begin to start to disperse a little bit more. And here again, you got to remember, we're talking about different populations of fish, because I'm not saying every bass in the lake is in an early summer pattern where they're out on these point ends. You've got a lot of bass that live shallow all year long. They never go out there. But a large percentage of those fish that are offshore or on those deeper structures, schooled up, when that water temperature starts to get in that 80-degree mark, these fish will start busting up a little bit. The schools bust up, the fish start to disperse a little bit. You start to get a thermocline that forms in the lake, and that thermocline is going to pull some of those bass off the bottom. It's going to make them suspend a little bit more. So that's why fishing starts to get a little bit tougher in July and August. It's that transition from the early summer patterns where those fish are on the bottom and there's no thermocline, to the time in the summer where you have that thermocline. Bass start suspending more. Some of the bass will suspend, some of the bass will actually begin to move shallower because the deeper water oxygen levels aren't sufficient for them, and it just gets tougher to catch them. You don't catch those big bags of fish that are schooled up like you did before. In this case, what I do, this is sort of, and back to the real world application, is, say for example, if I spend most of my June deep cranking or throwing a football head jig or something like that, when July rolls around and I feel that those fish are starting to make their summer transition, that's when I start mixing up my patterns a little bit more. I'll start throwing maybe some more top waters in the morning early during low light conditions. I'll start running the backs of the creeks and river arms, and I'll start looking for the more stained shallow water cover options, and I start looking for shallower structures on the main lake. They're still offshore, but areas like, instead if I was fishing say 20 foot deep in the summertime of the year, I may move to like 10 feet deep. I'll start looking for maybe like man-made brush piles. I'll start looking for suspended bass over those point ends and sides. A lot of this depends on the lake that I'm fishing. If I'm fishing a clear water lake, you're going to have a lot more bass in the summertime that begins to suspend out over that deeper water. But if you're fishing a dirty lake, like a Grand Lake, Oklahoma, or like a Lake Eufaula, Alabama, that's when those man-made brush piles in that little bit shallower water start to pay off, sort of in that 8 to 12 foot zone. Those fish will start moving a little bit shallower. They don't school up as much. They're more individual rogue type bass. So this begins the part of the year that just gets tougher fishing, and it just gets tougher as the summer goes on. As July wears on to August, and August wears on to September, those bass will even disperse even more. They suspend even more. They get harder to catch, and that's why for a lot of people consider the month of September the toughest month of the year to catch bass and man-made impoundments, just because of that. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to go over that. That's what the summer transition is. It's just a transition of the fish make when they move, with water temperatures in the summertime of year, a little bit of change in the oxygen content, changes in the thermocline, that type of stuff. And it's just a never-ending cycle that the bass go through in these lakes that they're in. So hope that shared a little bit of insight with you guys, help you guys catch some more fish because of that. And again, thanks for tuning into the channel. Much appreciated, and we'll be back soon. See you.